Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our virtual meetup titled Stopping Financial Fraud in Its Tracks with AI. In this meetup, Jagdish Rajarajan will go over fraud detection in the finance industry and take us through a live demonstration of AI solutions with real world datasets. My name is Saurabh Kumar, and I'm on the marketing team here at H2O.ai. I'd love to start off by introducing our speaker today. Jagdish is a data scientist at H2O.ai and is a part of the customer success team in the APJ region. He's an IIT Kanpur alumni and comes with a rich data science experience across multiple industries. Without further ado, I would now like to hand it over to Jagdish.
Hey, thank you very much, SK, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining this call today. Right. So today, as SK said, we'll be looking at we'll be looking at a use case which is like fraud detection using like driverless AI. And so this will be the agenda for us today. We'll first have a look at what is H2O and what is driverless AI, and we'll then try to understand fraud detection use case, some of the challenges which we typically see in a typical fraud detection use case, and how we can solve them. So there are two ways of approaching this problem. One is by supervised learning. We will be using driverless AI for that. And then second, we'll also cover some unsupervised learning approaches. Now, some of these unsupervised learning algorithms can be also done inside driverless AI, but like we'll be demonstrating it both inside driverless AI and via H2O open source. So hopefully, you will be able to try out both. And we'll also have a demo of mainly of driverless AI, and we'll briefly cover H2O open source as well, given the time we have. So yeah, given this is the agenda, now let's have a look at first what is H2O and what is driverless AI. So H2O, we are an open source leader in AI and machine learning, right? Our dream is to make your company an AI company. So we help businesses transform into an AI company. And how we do that? Yeah, this is a snapshot of this. Like we have a team of like 200 plus AI experts, right? Through them, like we build a lot of cutting edge models and tools which you can use. Over like 1,000 universities users and like 20,000 plus companies use our H2O like tools for data science modeling. We have a very rich meetup presence, and in addition to this, we also have some 200,000 plus users of H2O open source. So yeah, in terms of solutions which we offer, these are the three things which we have. Like, so what we call as a like our first generation data science platform is the H2O open source, right? Like if you are a data scientist, you would already be like aware of this platform. Now second generation platform is driverless AI. So now this is like this, we can think of it like something. It comprises all of our H2O open source plus some more things which makes your job easier to build and deploy production level machine learning models easily, and not just build models to get further insights out of it, reports out of it very easy. Our third generation tool is something what we would like to call as Q. This takes one level further from building machine learning models. This makes it like more easier for data scientists to build machine learning applications directly from data. So with this, yeah, for today's session, most likely we'll be like spending a lot of time on driverless AI. So these are some of the capabilities of driverless AI. We'll look at them more deeper in the demo. But to start with, like we support a rich stream of data sources. Like if your data is in any tabular format, right, be it HDFS, SQL, local storage, or Amazon S3, it's very easy to import into driverless AI. Use a drag and drop. And as soon as you upload the data, you'll be able to create exploratory data analysis automatically without having to do any settings. And then obviously we provide state-of-the-art AutoML solutions with automatic model reporting and even like automatic model scoring pipelines in AWS. So these are some of the key strengths when you use driverless AI for any modeling. So like automatic data visualization, right? As soon as you upload the data, it automatically figures out what are the key things specific to this data set and only shows those insights rather than bombarding you with all possible charts and graphs. And then as you upload the data, right, you will automatically, like we understand the data and then figure out and tell you like what kind of an experiment you should be running for this specific data set, right? Cool. And yeah, one of the key strengths is also our low latency like model scoring pipeline. So typically one of the biggest challenges for data scientists is when you build a model, like it takes a lot of time for you to take it to production. Right? When you build models in driverless AI, one of the advantages is that as soon as you build the model, you have a production ready scoring pipeline ready. All right. And when I say production ready, like in the order of latencies, you can expect typically sub millisecond for a few thousand rows, right? And these models are also available directly for deployment into solutions like AWS Lambda. So yeah, now without wasting a lot of time, let's go to the use case of fraud detection. So what is fraud detection? We can think in the context of different industries. Say if you're a payment provider, right, you might be concerned about merchant fraud. If you are an insurance provider, right, in your context, it would be detecting fraudulent claims. For telecom, like it's something called like fraudulent SIM card activity. For credit card, it's obviously like fraudulent credit card transformations, right? In all this context, right, there's a huge amount of like monetary loss involved, and also loss of customers and loss of reputation for brands, right? So it's a very active and pretty challenging problem. And why it is challenging? So let's take this example just so that you understand the use case better. If you've seen this movie, Identity Thief, so there are two characters. Right. So this person is Sandy Patterson, and so this is a person who doesn't have an identity of her own, but rather tries to steal the identity of other people and then use their like credit cards and social security numbers to make both crimes like of financial nature and also other crimes and just escapes out of the thing. So now this is a kind of fraud detection. If you've seen in this movie, right, there are a lot of signs through which you would probably build a like mental model to detect this kind of a fraud. So one obvious pattern was that this person is from Denver, whereas the place of area where the crime was happening was in Florida, right? So and because of some US like security loophole as per the movie, what she was doing is that like if a crime happens in Florida, Denver people won't be able to like prosecute her unless she comes to Denver. So it takes a long loophole. So she found this loophole and she is just exploiting this loophole by making frauds. So this is a classic case of fraud. Now, when we build models for fraud detection, it is our responsibility to figure out like such hidden patterns and then prevent it before happening. Now, like with this example in place, right now, compared to building any machine learning model, it's way harder to build a fraud detection model because of the following reasons. One is extreme class imbalance, right? So we have this assumption of IID in machine learning, which is completely like tossed out in fraud detection, because if you see the credit card transactions, the number of fraudulent transactions would be less than 0.01%. If it's anything more than that, probably the company would go bankrupt, right? So like the extreme class imbalance makes it very hard, and also extreme class overlap, because these frauds are not happening via random. These are explicitly made by smart people. So what happens is that like they try to imitate like behavior as close as possible. And an example is obviously this. You see, like, this person have kind of imitated this person's like driving license and all the cards, right? So this pattern looks almost same as real life patterns. And because of the extreme class overlap, if you see how like machine learning works, that we have data and we find some patterns on the data to make some target predictions, right? So now if the classes are extremely overlapping, it'll be very hard for any model to learn the behavior. We need more powerful and richer features to differentiate the behavior. And third is the most challenging, which is concept drift. People evolve over time. So as we build like security like firewalls for a lot of fraud detection, fraud problems, like people evolve and the patterns of fraud also evolve over time. So people get smarter and smarter and then like build more powerful like fraudulent techniques. And the fourth is dealing with real-time data. With all these problems, another thing is that in most often, right, we have a very narrow time interval to prevent that fraud. Now, imagine you like trying to pay for a hospital. Now, you want the payment to be very fast, right? You don't want the payment to take like 15 minutes or 20 minutes. You swipe the card, you want the transactions to be as real time as possible. Now, with all the challenges above, right, we want to build a model which handles, say, millions of transactions per second. right? And gives a faster response at the same time, prevent such fraud to happen. So now this is why like fraud detection is one of, especially in the financial industry, is one of the hardest things to crack. In this session, we'll try to see how driverless AI offers some of the tools to help us solve this problem. This is a case study by PayPal, right? So there is a like talk available in our YouTube channel, and also the case study is also available on our website in this URL. Like I'd advise you to go like have a look at it. So this is an example of collusion fraud in the context of PayPal, where both the merchants and the buyers, like the sellers and the buyers collude together to commit fraud. And it's quite interesting to see how they have used driverless AI to solve this problem. We will cover like a more general list of techniques and like philosophies of how to go and approach about this. One thing which I want to cover like as part of this is this concept called OODA loop. This is quite interesting to look at fraud detection in the context of this. This is proposed by John Boyd, like he's from the US Air Force. So what John Boyd suggests is a framework of how we think. So we typically observe, we orient, we decide, and act. In the context of scientific modeling, like we have observations, we come up with a hypothesis, we build a model, and then we observe the real life data, we test it, and we again have observations. So a good mental framework to think of it. So now this framework was made for like US pilots to come up with. So John Boyd was teaching them how to disorient the opponents and win in dogfights. So what it essentially happens is what John Boyd calls is get inside your adversary's OODA loop. Now, when if you see how fraud happens, most fraudsters what they're trying to do is they're trying to get inside your OODA loop and try to disorient you. And what is disorientation? So you have a mental model of how financial transaction works. Now, the fraudsters, what typically they happen is they try to get inside your OODA loop, they disorient you, and they take it to their advantage for making this thing. So it's very so like in a normal use case, if you build one machine learning model, like it most likely may not get redundant like for a couple of months at least. But if you're building a fraud model, it's very important to see that every time you build a model and you deploy it, your adversary is constantly trying to like disorient that model. So like a part of your opponent's strategy is trying to observe your model and trying to disorient your model and trying to use it to his advantage so that he can commit that crime. And the second problem is that you don't even know when the attack happens. Right? Like so for a person, right, he like the models are deployed, it's fine, but you would not even know like what kind of fraud, what kind of patterns is going to happen. So we'll get into driverless AI now. We'll use a couple of Kaggle data sets from the financial industry to see how we can model such a problem inside driverless AI. So the first thing we'd want to start is how do we upload the data set? Like so again, as I said, we support a rich stream of data uploading solutions. For now, I've already downloaded these two data sets. So one for credit fraud and another is for credit default. Right. So as soon as you upload the data set, the first thing we provide you is a bunch of quick insights on the data set. If you want to look at how the data looks like, this is directly straight out of Kaggle. This is based on credit card frauds. Now, the columns are like gone through a transformation called principal component analysis. If you're a data scientist, you're aware of this. Just for the sake of folks who doesn't know what PCA is, PCA is a linear transformation on the data so that the data is transposed into another dimension. So we won't know what these columns actually are. But what we do see is like a transformed version of the data set, which pretty much explains what it was in the original data set. And this is the target class which we are concerned about. So 0 means no fraud, 1 means fraud. And as we expect here, one of the common thing which we expect in a credit fraud transaction is the class has to be extreme imbalance, right? So if you see like here we would have 0.0017% of the class to be positive. So that's extreme class imbalance, and we need to keep it in mind of this when we are building models. Sometimes when you have such extreme class imbalance, your models may not perform well if you do not do a careful cross validation and stuff. Again, we have split the data into train and test set already. Like if not, I suggest them you do it. So if you want to build a model, before building a model, let's have a look at our auto visualization. So in this case, so this is how we build an auto visualization for this tool. Yeah. So by default, we give you like histograms where there are spikes, histograms with a large amount of skews, and there are any gaps. If there are any correlation in the data, like we try to highlight you like what kind of correlation, which variables are correlated with what. Given that the columns are done PCA transformation, so we see like a lot of columns aren't really related, because if you see how PCA works, these are orthogonal transformations, right? So you may not see a lot of correlation in this data, but if you take some of the data, like you would expect like good amount of correlation. And with respect to spikes on any data set, or say is there any skew in any of the columns, right? So we can gather a good amount of quick insights using the AutoVis platform, right? Now, to building a model, again, it's a very simple thing. Like all you need to do is to click predict one. If you have a test data set, like we highly encourage that you select the test data set. In this case, we do have this is a credit fraud test data set. Yeah. So here we select the target column. Now, if you see the, like just for the sake of all the features which we have, so we have a time column. We have some set of principal components, like say V1 to V28, and we have the amount of transaction. The time is the time, the time duration it took for the transaction, right? The time amount and a bunch of other features which are transformed into via PCA. And then the class is the actual target column, like whether it's a fraud or not. Now, once we select a bunch of settings, when you use driverless AI, it kind of becomes very trivial that it automatically identifies a defined set of accuracy. This is for mainly for cross validation. Time is for how rich you want your features to be, and interpretability is how like interpretable your models. So in this case, because the features have gone through PCA, we may not get a lot of insights on PCA. So maybe I can decrease the interpretability to a little. Time maybe I can increase a little because as I see that like for this kind of problems, I care a lot about my accuracy, right? But if you want the models to finish faster in time, maybe I would suggest decrease the accuracy and time setting. So like higher the accuracy, the more rigorous will be the cross validation, and higher the time, like the more powerful will be the features. And obviously, like both of these things take a significant amount of time. And as you adjust the accuracy, time, and interpretability settings on the left hand side, you see a preview of what kind of models are being selected, and what kind of features are this thing. So if you have a very high interpretability, like monotony constraints will be like enabled, right? So because you have low interpretability, like these constraints doesn't really fall in place. By default, like now it's considering light GBM and XGBoost based on these settings. Now, if you want to have more powerful models, right, may not be powerful models, but say like a very specific kind of models, you can import it via recipes. Like we have a like whole bunch of models available, right? That like you select whatever model is your preferred choice of models. You can select like we support some 200 plus transformations. Like you support like you can select whatever transformations which you want. You can even enable things like, say for example, this is a fraud production use case. I can probably like enable like isolation forest. Now this is a technique which we will see later using H2 open source as well, but this would be useful. Or say I want imbalance, because the data set is highly imbalanced, I might want to enable imbalance sampling methods. Now when you make it to auto for imbalance sampling, what driverless AI does behind the back is, for all data sets where there is a like high imbalance, it automatically does imbalance sampling and build models which are very specific to imbalanced data. For example, as soon as I change the setting, you would see imbalance light GBM and imbalance XGBoost. Yeah. So here we see imbalanced models. And so what happens behind the back is that these are models which are optimized for imbalanced data sets, right? And even in terms of features, we have like this isolation forest based features, which typically helps in cases where there are like a lot of anomalies. So here I've enabled because like fraud is a kind of anomaly, right? So yeah, so let it run until that, like, we have like bunch of experiments already completed on this data set. So I'll show you some of the previous. So this is the last experiment which I got it completed. You see, like this experiment, we have enabled isolation forest and a bunch of other things. So, and you see that, like, the isolation forest related features are coming out as some of the top important variables in this thing. So that's a good thing. It means that anomaly detection is helping in the specific use case. You want to see like what exactly is the pipeline. So this is the final model. So we have done a five-fold cross validation with Light GPM as model, and then we have done a stacked ensemble. And for the Light GPM, these are the features which have gone inside, and this is the prediction. So this is the scoring pipeline. For all the experiments, if you want an auto report, like you get it out of driverless AI automatically. So with this report, you will be able to see like what kind of features are being selected, what transformers have been applied. So everything you see in the like UI, you get it in the form of like Word document, which can be useful for you to this thing. We also have this option of interpret this model. So now what interpret this model does is it gives you a whole bunch of visualization of the model. Now we do it in multiple ways. We like give interpretation for the driverless AI model which we have built in the form of say Shapley or feature importance or partial dependence plots, sensitivity analysis. If you have text features, we do like some basic NLP analysis and give you insights on that. We also build a bunch of surrogate models, say like K-Lime, decision trees, like random forest, right? And then we give insights based on surrogate models. So whatever is possible to give you an idea of what is happening in this use case. Again, because if you're trying to build a model for fraud detection, it is not just important to have a model which works. It's also important to understand how people are creating fraud, right? So that you can potentially like trap the like ideas of the fraudsters and try to build like more powerful firewalls. Yeah, so the MLI is kind of pretty much happening for this thing. focus on the H2O open source stuff until we actually get this most likely reason that the server have crashed because we're not able to access anything as of now. No worries. So by now, right, we have seen the supervised way of doing things inside driverless AI. So like we pretty much seen like the AutoVis, how to build models, and we're just about to see interpretability. Like if the server like comes back, I'll be able to demo with that. Now, what I'm trying to show you is when you don't have a lot of training data, like how you can build a model using H2 open source. The first technique which we'll cover is isolation forest. If you see, I showed you in driverless AI on like when we enabled isolation forest, we saw that like these features were giving good improvements to the model. Right now, how isolation forest works, it takes advantage of two simple quantitative properties of anomalous data. One is like typically anomalies are few. That's why it's called anomalies, right? It's very different from other data. And second is anomalies are very different from the other points. So if you look at the fraudulent transactions, now these are two simple quantitative properties that takes advantage. If you see the image in blue here, right? So the red dots are anomalies. When we built a simple isolation forest, what you see is the contour plot of the decision function, and it's two-dimensional plot. And you see the red points are easily separated by the decision boundary, right? And how isolation forest works, much like any decision tree or a simple, like say, very similar to random forest. But say how it works is you randomly select a feature, you identify what is the min value and max value of that feature, and then you randomly split by selecting any value in between the min and max value, right? Now, how we identify a feature as anomaly, that when you do it a whole bunch of times to isolate a feature, right? So the number of splits it requires to isolate a single sample is being saved, right? And when you have a forest of such trees, the average like duration to split a sample is being considered, and that is used as a measure to identify anomalies. So we see a more clear example. Let's take two examples here, like one on the left and one on the right. You're able to easily see that one on the left, right, it takes more number of splits to isolate this point compared to the point in the right, where it takes fairly like less number of samples. Like maybe in two or three splits, we should be able to like split this specific data set, even when we like aim a random splitting. So when we take an average of such splits, you can expect that the point on the right side will take like much like smaller splits on an average compared to the point on the left. And obviously like, so this could be called as an anomaly and not this. So this is the essence of how isolation forest works, and it indeed gives much better performance when used as a feature for either a supervised learning model or used as an isolated component for identifying anomalies. So yeah, now coming back to the detailed question, the same old example. So here we have seen that, like, this is based out of scikit-learn. So this, I've plotted the decision boundary, and so these are the anomal points. So like when you train the model with only the non-anomaly points, and like try to like predict for new samples, it was able to easily identify the new anomaly points. So for the new observations, the green are the regular ones and the red are the anomal points. Right? So wherever it found it as an anomaly, it was able to easily mark those points as anomalies, because like as obviously see that the decision lines are able to clearly like differentiate the red points. If you want to do the same thing in H2O open source, this is the code for it. Like it's fairly few lines of code, and you have a lot of examples available online to do this thing. So with this, you should be able to get an isolation forest train. Also do have some code files. In case if you have any questions on any of these techniques, feel free to like post it. We'll handle it at the end of the session. The next technique which we want to cover is autoencoders. Now, autoencoders are a specific variant of deep learning models, much like any other feed-forward neural networks. But the only difference is that like you do not try to predict anything new. What we try to predict is pretty much the same input. Sometimes we have noisy autoencoders where you introduce some components of noise along with inputs and try to predict the original input. But in general, the rule of thumb is that we have an encoding layer and we have a decoding layer. Now, how the autoencoder helps for an use case like fraud protection. So we feed an input, right? Like we recollect back the original output, and typically there is an error because if you see, we decrease the amount of information in the original input, right? So in the encoder layer, somewhere in between, the representation which we get could be much simpler than the original input which we have fed. So it obviously has some loss of information. So it learns the pattern of the input and tries to regenerate the input based out of that pattern. Now, anything which is anomalous, right, which is not so obvious, won't be able to like regenerate as exactly as possible. So this measured error between the input and the like generated input gives us an idea of how anomalous this input is. Maybe hard to like visualize for someone in the new, but this technique actually works well in practical. So if you see typically how it works, say so similar inputs, right, should ideally give similar outputs. So this is the idea. Say for example, now if there are any deviations from the expected behavior, so that could be called as an anomaly. For example, so you have an input, you encode, you get a compressed representation, and we decode, and then we get the like reconstructed input. Now, this reconstructed input, even though looks similar to original input, this was not directly generated out of the original input. Right? This is generated about the compressed representation. Now, if you look at this compressed representation, this doesn't directly like tells what this original is. So we have an encoder model and we have a decoder model, and the decoder model is regenerating this thing. And because of this encoder decoder representation patterns, what we can think of is that like what we essentially learn is, let's say if this is credit card transactions, we have an like compressed representation of how transactions typically happen, and the decoder tries to decode that given this kind of a compressed representation, what could have originally happened. Now, if the decoder representation deviates significantly from the original input, so that could be considered as a cause of concern, and then like look for like deeper analysis. And how autoencoder in this case is different from a PC. If you see our original credit card data set, the data set was transformed via PC, as I said. Right? Now, when you make a 2D visualization with PC or autoencoders, it will look almost like the same thing. This is TSNE applied on top of PC and given a plot of this. How they do is one of the most significant thing is PC is typically linear. Autoencoders can represent non-linear representations. This is very powerful because when you have linear representations, typically it's a constraint on the model. It leads to simpler models, but in use cases like this, we might need powerful representations, right? So like autoencoders, that's useful, and also PCA doesn't have this concept of even in PCA we do find deviations, but it doesn't work in the concept of this encoder and decoder format. So like PC may not be used for fraud detection that much, whereas autoencoder can be. And again, if you want to use like autoencoders for anomaly detection in driverless AI, this is how it's fairly simple. Like you train an like anomaly model, and then like you should be able to predict it in this. Again, we have code samples for both of them, for both anomaly detection. These are also like available in our blogs, and a lot of people, because it's open source, a lot of people have also wrote tutorials for H2O3 for both anomaly detection and isolation forest. But we'll be happy to answer any of your queries or concerns on either of this or even the driverless AI. Before we go to the learning center, let's just try to see if we can cover the machine learning interpretability part. Yeah, I think the server is back. Yeah, I really apologize for like the crash earlier. So yeah, so I'm going to use the another data set, which is the credit default data set. So the only reason for using another data set for this demo is that this is also a financial transaction data, and second is here the variables are not transform. So here I have actual values, and I just want to show you how like some of, so this is Shapley. given for any row or in general for the data set, you will be able to identify how the features are affecting. Yeah. So you see, given any row, like whether the features are positively influencing the predictions or negatively influencing the prediction. So the limit balance in this example is positively influencing the predictions, whereas the pay values are influencing negatively. You want to see what the models are. Let's go to a surrogate model. So this is a case of financial like credit default, whether the person will default or not. We have payment related information, and we have information related to the amount of that payment, and based on these transactions, so the model is trying to learn whether the person will default or will actually pay back. Now if you are a agency who is giving credit cards or loans via say loan, these days a lot of providers are even giving loans via mobile, right? So if you want to know whether this person will default or not, so such models will be very useful. Given the person's previous transactions and the previous amount of transactions, you will be able to build a model with reasonable accuracy on what is the probability that this person will default on the next transaction, right? So again, so we give surrogate model. So this is say decision trees. K-Lime is it's based out of Lime, but a very custom version of it. So we build clusters on the data, and then for each clusters, we try to tell you what is happening for that row. So if you take any specific point, you will be able to get a localized model built for that cluster, explaining in that like locality how the features are impacting the actual predictions. Shapley for the people, yeah, again for all the docs, if you just look at the help, you get a detailed explanation of like how these models are built. For the folks who don't know about Shapley, Shapley is about so imagine you like it's like a game theoretic model applied for machine learning. So how do you give credits to each feature for the final prediction? Right? So you make so the let's say the final prediction is in this case is minus so 1.541, and like how this minus 1.451 comes up, right? So how each features are contributing. If you see the pay 0, pay 2, pay 3, and pay 5 have contributed so much, and the limit balance have contributed slightly on the positive side. So now collectively, like these features gives rise to the final prediction. Shapley is just a like distributed way of understanding on like what each features are contributing to the final predictions. The typical example I use for this is, let's say you have a football match. Now, Messi scored 3 goals, but then it doesn't mean that like Messi is the only person who's responsible for the predictions. So there is a different. There are like people who have assisted Messi. Now, if you apply Shapley value to the game, how much credit you can give in terms of goals to each of the person. So something like that when applied to machine learning. So that's what you can think of Shap values. And overall, yeah, so the interpretability we give, I believe, is fairly like helpful, right? Because we don't just give one specific form of interpretation. Like, so we give feature importance, Shapley values, line, and Shapley values we give both in the form of transformed features and also in the form of original features. Now, what transformed features is that like transformed features are features when driverless AI's transformations are applied on top of it. You these are the features which actually goes into the model, but sometimes you want the explanation also in the form of original features. So so we regenerate Shapley values contributions in the form of original features, and again display it just so that you have a simple understanding of how each of the feature inputs, the way in which you give it, actually affects the final predictions. So when you train a model, right, it definitely gives you a good understanding of how it happens. Partial dependent plots are very simple plots. So these give, you can select any feature and try to see how this feature is affecting the target predictions. So like for like say in this case, limit balance has been selected. I can select any other value. Let's say I say pay 0, right? So for pay 0, you will be again able to see like how pay 0 is affecting the target prediction. If you want to see how pay 2 is affecting, so yeah, this is how pay 2 is affecting. So you have a like understanding of how a single feature is affecting the prediction. You have sensitivity analysis, which says if you change specific values say if I change the pay 0 to -4 for everything, right? I'm just example, just go, just see how the target predictions are affected when you make such a change. Yeah, so there's a 30% increase in the prediction when you make pay 0 to -4. So you'll be able to see like when you affect like any, you can do it at a feature level, say at a specific row level, or you can do it at a this. So this again could be useful if you just want to play around with kind of something like what if analysis. Like what if I change this value? Like what will happen if I actually like make a transaction in this specific row or this specific column? And you will be able to subsequently see like how different features are affecting, right? And if you want, so by default we give 4 5 columns here. You want to select more columns, that's also pretty much possible. Yeah, I think we are like around like covered like 40 45 minutes, so we can take on questions. And if anyone has, again with the question side, we can again always come back to either the demo or these slides. Hey, hello SK.
Thank you, Jagdish. Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute myself. I had some trouble with my internet. Let's look at the questions. Will reinforced learning help to increase classification accuracy in detecting fraudulent transactions?
So I've never seen like people actually building reinforcement learning. If you see like how reinforcement learning works, right? So you try to look at so I've seen people using supervised and unsupervised learning for like fraud detection problems. Never really seen reinforcement learning as such for fraud detection problems.
Okay, we can circle back to this question when we have more information. Is PCA processing done outside driverless AI? Can data processing be done in the pipeline?
Yes, so if you're asking with driverless AI in the pipeline, yes, we have something called data recipes. Like not just PCA transformations, you want to apply any transformations, even like autoencoders or something of that sort. So this can be done in the form of data recipes. So any component can be fed in, and most of these things are also available as part of specific driverless AI transformers itself. So you might not even have to regenerate it. If you're asking a question outside driverless AI, say like H2O open source, yeah, again, like this is typically used procedure that like generally people do use PCA or something, some other like dimensionality reduction techniques as a part of their pipelines.
Thank you. How is model drift implemented or monitored?
Model drift is an easy way of doing is just you can have a distribution of your target predictions for like given subsamples and try to see whether the target distribution deviates much from doing this thing. So this is one way, or say even save the like the min max or overall values. So an example would be, let's say that typically, let's say your model predicts 0.001% of people as fraud. Now, suddenly, if it's predicting 0.5% as fraud, either like the actual fraud have increased or there is something wrong. So you want to make sure that that like the model's parameters are consistent over time. The predictions, the feature values, right? Say if any of the target distribution changes, it affects. So one example which I've seen in real time is that sometimes people build models based on external signals. Now, if that external signal changes, right, your model definition actually kind of changes. So this is a case where we're predicting the website is like being spam or not, but what happens is that you're using an external person's API. So what suddenly have happened is that the external person changed. Set driverless AI identifies for both like data leakage, which is like if the test set has some sort of information which it should not have from the train set, or the train set has some sort of information about the test set which it should not have, or there is a significant change between the test set and train set. Is there is a distributional change, like the way features are working in the train set and test set, and it alerts you on that, so that if it's random, it's okay. If you don't think it's a problem, but if you think it is a concern, maybe you can investigate deep on that.
Thank you, Jagdish, for a wonderful explanation. Next question, is there any specific way to select the features to be used in autoencoders?
No, in autoencoders, not the only way is that like you can stop the features. So typically you can add noise to autoencoders, and a variant of noise is also something called dropouts. You can say like, randomly like make some of the nodes zero so that the model learns more generalization. These two are fine with respect to autoencoders, not just in driverless AI or S2, like in any like autoencoders in general. So you won't be able to select how, and basically like, all the nodes and different activation functions, right? What gets learned inside that is not in your control when you train like autoencoder or any deep learning model. And essentially that is what the nature of this thing. If you want to do it, so that is what a tool like driverless AI can do for you. That like you can have specific models where you can choose what kind of transformations you want, what kind of models you want to build. So if you want, then you are looking for a tool like driverless AI, not something like autoencoders in H2 open source.
Great, thank you. We have a use case to predict an error in the transaction performed by data operators. Is this a use case that H2O can help with?
Sure. Can you please repeat the use case alone? Error in
Yes.
transactions?
Error in the transactions performed by data operators.
Yeah, I think this is something both isolation forest and this thing like anomaly detection should be like, they'll be able to highlight curious cases, may not be able to exactly tell whether it's an error or not. But if you have some say labeled examples, right? Say something like isolation forest plus a classification model in driverless AI will not just build a model for you, will also tell you with the MLI and auto report on what exactly is happening behind the hood. Like you will know about what kind of uh, like errors which your people are actually making.
Thank you. In this pandemic situation where online transactions are happening 10 times more, classifying a fraudulent activity or not is even a bigger challenge, given the past data may not exactly replicate the future. Do you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, definitely. This is very true. This is a real-time problem, right? So the very fact that a lot of things have changed. For example, earlier you would go to a supermarket and swipe the card. Like now, the supermarket guy can come to your house and then you will swipe the card. I did it like a couple of days back. So I generally never make a card transactions from my home, but currently, like I'm making a lot of card transactions at my home from multiple players. Now, this could be a like very curious pattern. It's very hard, honestly, when you build such models, and that is essentially the challenge. You never know. Like maybe someone is taking advantage of it. What if a person is stealing cards or like imitating cards and then like swiping from the same location? Typically, it's a good feature saying that from a specific IP or geo, you see a lot of transactions being happening, right? Or like transactions on like multiple cards, unless it's a like valid entity. Now these kind of things are like keep happening, but then that's a part of the like problem. Like and like from my experience, right, working with like the insurance industry and credit card industry folks, working, most of those models are like very robust, but still occasionally it does make some mistakes. Like if you see the features, like you would not even think of such fraud detection features the way an insurance modeler thinks of it. So there is a like this industry has been for the last 200 years, right? So they have seen a lot of frauds, they have burned their hands, they have learned valuable lessons, but still it's an ongoing an exercise.
Thank you, Jagdish. Explainability is more important in financial fraud detection because we should answer why the model thought a person or an entity committed fraud. What are the steps, techniques the industry is using to understand black box models?
Okay. Yeah, so very like genuine question, especially in the financial industry, right? There's a lot of regulation. For example, and it's very hard for the people to like not go on this thing. So I'll take on the example of the identity theft example again. I went on it right now. There's a very simple feature here, which is the original. Both the people's name is Sandy Bigelow Patterson, but one person is a male, another person is a female. It's a very important feature to handle it. But let's say your regulator in your country says that you cannot use a person's gender in any format, like not just the thing. Like if you would have saved that through some means that like in the card one and the card two, the gender is actually changed, right? See here you see the sex is male, here is the sex is female. Like if this is a change and if a new card is associated with a social security number, right, you should have been able to fairly like figure out this fraud. But let's say your model doesn't, your like regulator doesn't allow you to train a model based on this pattern. It becomes very hard to like build this thing, right? So because you have a lot of constraints from regulators on how you do it, obviously for the right reason, because you don't want to discriminate giving a loan to someone on the basis of their gender or their race or their age, right? Like so that's like valid from a like political point of view. It just makes the modeling a lot more harder, right? You have to really play with the options in your hand, and these are typically the areas where people try to take advantage of. So the moment people see that there is a loophole, they try to take advantage of it, and you have to work with the regulators and sometimes even the fraudsters to come with a solution for it.
Thank you, Jagdish. Um, can we effectively perform feature selection through Shapley values?
Feature selection. So Shapley is more of an explanation, both Shapley and even feature importance. It's an understanding of what is happening, like so, like how each of these features are like affecting my predictions. Uh, like yes, both to some extent gives you an idea of how to select these features. Like essentially, like why not? Like you can definitely like if you have say 200, 300 features, if you want to select like a bunch of things, but generally what we have seen for these kind of financial use cases is even if a feature is minutely important, you tend to have that in that feature because you never know, that might be very important for a specific use case, like because you are dealing with 0.001% of like fraud cases. So you would ideally want to have all the features. That like feature selection is not something you would do for this thing, but for a general use case, if you're asking, yes, if you're dealing with thousands or hundreds of features, yeah, you can think about feature selection, and Shapley or even the both simple random forest based feature importance, which is the permutation feature importance, which we call it. Both are equally useful for selecting features.
Thank you, Jagdish. Can we apply incremental learning for trained models?
So, like if you're training a deep learning model, this is feasible because if you see how deep learning models work, is that like it's essentially the metric state, right? You're updating the metric state and then like you're training further and further models. But if you are say training like if you're doing the same thing inside driverless AI, there is not a concept of say actual increment like an experiment, like a finished experiment is a finished experiment because of some reasons, like this technique doesn't apply to all the models. Say like an XGBoost, it's not really like applicable, right? But you have some options retrain. Like you can start the training from the previous iteration, so that is fine. So like it is doesn't happen by default. So you can either start a new experiment based out of an existing driverless AI experiment. You can start the training from the stage the previous experiment have completed. And there is also another thing which we have, which is feature brain. That typically what happens is that when you run multiple experiments on the same data set, if there are some features and some model combinations which are like winning performers, so they are directly taken out of previous experiments. So like when you have, it's very hard if you use outside driverless AI, like you say, if you're training your own random forest model, it's typically not so like fine, because say you train in scikit-learn or say scikit-learn or any other like platform which you want to train. You have a model, you try to retrain the model, it will be like a new experiment from the scratch, right? Unless you train a deep learning model in Keras or something, or even in H2, if you want to train a deep learning model. So that retraining from a like existing state should be like feasible, but not in general in supervised learning frameworks.
Great, thank you. Next question. Is seasonality handled in the process? Say, for example, every transaction over the weekend is different from the transactions on weekdays, and should not be handled as anomalies. What is your take on that?
Yeah, so if you provide the date column, then it is so, because when you provide date columns, what happens behind the hood is that some date related features are automatically generated. Like, so there are two ways of having date columns. So one is it will first ask you that like whether you want to run it as a time series experiment or a like normal classification experiment. So time series could be, say you want to predict the number of rods, or like what any time series parameter which changes over day. Or if you just say like no, this is just a time column, generate time features out of it. So we by default generate features like day of the month, all the like seasonality related features which are being generated. You can generate a holiday related transaction, say for different geographies, because again the transactions will differ for holiday or like just before the holidays, right? So so those features are generated, and if you see how like not just that, like in the we call it a genetic algorithm based feature selection and feature evolution pipeline. So the moment you see the time column is coming out to be important, more transformers will be applied on top of it in combination with other features, and you will ideally get a powerful like transform feature engineering pipeline based out of those specific columns. And indeed, like if you're dealing with consumer related information, time would be like very useful.
Thank you. How to ensure recent data is given more preference than old data as fraud patterns evolve over time?
So this is tricky. One is you use better smart sampling techniques, right? Because it's like it's tricky in the sense for like you need some amount of like data scientist hand on this, uh, because you might also very well want the reverse pattern as well. Like let's say you have some other use case where you want the like all the data to be considered equal, no data to be considered equal. So one thing is that you do more sampling of the recent data. Like let's say um, for example, a simple probabilistic sample which I can say on the fly is that you create a value between 0 to 1, right? And the farther away from the close, it's more close to 0, and the closer to current value, it's close to 1. Based on that specific threshold, you resample the data. So obviously you're going to resample the new data like much larger time. So you run this as a bootstrap sampling a bunch of times. The resultant data which you will have more samples from the new data points, right? So if you transform the data in such a way that there are like more samples of the original data set. Another thing which you can use is if you are aware of this technique called SMART, synthetic minority oversampling techniques, that like you assign like a minority label for the new samples, and then you generate synthetic data out of the new sample. So what SMART does is that let's say like I have a column 1, column 2, and column 3, right? It's gonna generate data points which are similar in my data set, and in between them it's going to dynamically put a dot and take that point and add it in your data set. So like either just do simple oversampling, or smart based like oversampling for the recent data alone, and then use the collective data for modeling.
Awesome. Thank you, Jagdish. We're at the top of the hour. but I want to squeeze in one very important question. How do you handle imbalanced data set? Do you oversample?
Yes, I think we did cover. So in driverless, like we does both oversampling and undersampling, and we also build models which are very specific to imbalance sampling. Say, because what happens is that people, you do one thing, but you never know like which one exactly works for it. So there are like imbalance. There are models which are optimized for imbalance data, which we use, and there are also sampling techniques. We do both, like oversampling of like smaller data and undersampling of the like this thing, and see like whichever works, because the test set is phased, right? You try different combination, whichever works for this specific data set, it comes. Typically, I would personally go with say oversampling of the like smaller data set instead of going for undersampling of the larger data set, because we lose some information in that thing. But we don't like we can't guarantee that this will work in all problems. So like, from a driverless standpoint, we do both. Hey, Saurabh, I lost you for a second. I'm not able to hear you.
Thank you, Jagdish. Thank you to our audience for joining us today, for doing and thank you again, Jagdish, for doing a wonderful presentation. We'll send out the slides and recording of this meetup fairly shortly. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day, everybody. Bye.
Hey, thank you, SK. Thank you very much for hosting this. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.